Hi and welcome to this podcast, which is all about signals. We're talking about the MSPSL routine, and the signals is the second part of that. You might be thinking, well, surely there's not too much to discuss about signals, but actually there can be some issues around signals that can cause some troubles to learners and other drivers. So perhaps a signal can be confusing because it's put on late, or it's put on early, or it wasn't put on when it should have been put on, or vice versa. So we need to make sure that we're very clear about when signals are necessary and when they're not. So let's start off with the basic moving off and stopping. There's about three elements: moving off and stopping. We'll talk about that first. Then we'll talk about junctions, and then we'll talk about going around obstacles. And I'll just touch on roundabouts at the end, but not in too much detail. So moving off and stopping. When you're moving off and stopping, you don't always need to signal. So most people will think that you absolutely have to signal whenever you're moving off or stopping, and it's not the case. The key thing is that you have a look in your mirrors and around you to make sure that no one will benefit from a signal. So if you're stopping and you've checked your mirrors and there's someone behind you, you absolutely need to signal to let them know your intention. Or if there's somebody sitting in a parked car at the side of the road, maybe getting ready to move away themselves, again, you definitely signal to let them know what you're doing. And the same with moving off. Have a good look round. If somebody's going to benefit from your signal, put a signal on to let them know what you're doing. However, if you're getting ready to move off, you've had a good look round and you can see a car coming up behind you, and you're not intending to move off because you would impede his journey, then do not signal, because that's what we call a bad signal, because you're giving a mixed message to the driver. Because you put your signal on, he's thinking, oh, that learner's moving off. Well, of course, you're not going to move off, but he doesn't know that. So that's an incorrect signal. But if that car coming up behind you is really quite a long way back and you're happy to move off, you've got plenty of time to move off, you'd pop a signal on just to tell him what your intentions are. So you have to be very clear about the difference of those two situations. The other type of signal we can use when we're moving off is what we call an asking signal. And that's where, if you can imagine, you're sitting parked up at the side of the road on a very busy street and the cars are coming past you and they're bumper to bumper, there's no gaps coming up at all, and you're going to be sitting there till 5 o'clock if you don't get out. So we could put on a right signal, which would be saying, can somebody help me out here? I want to move out. And then somebody will eventually leave a gap for you. So that's what we call an asking signal. Let's move on to signals at junctions. We always teach our learners to signal at junctions. And let's say, for example, nice simple situation, you're planning on turning into a side road on the left. You would ideally start your MSPSL routine about 8 to 10 car lengths before that side road. However, if there are two side roads and you're planning on taking the second side road on the left, it's really important that you don't signal until you're past the first one. Because as you can imagine, if somebody was waiting to emerge from the first one, you're signalling left, they think you're turning in, they pull out in front of you. So that will be a bad signal. So sometimes you have to hold your signal until you're past the first road. As I say, we're going to talk about roundabouts separately, but generally we always teach our learners to signal at junctions. Let's talk about going around obstacles, and many times it'll be parked cars that we're going round. Again, it's really important that we check our mirrors, and it's not always necessary to signal right around a parked car or signal left to come back into the left. But it is really important that you check to make sure it's safe. So, for example, if you're waiting to go around a parked car and the chap behind you is pulled up quite close to you, maybe he's starting to push slightly to the right of you, you're thinking, he looks like he might be ready to overtake me, then you pop a right signal on just to say, please don't come round me, I am about to move round. And the other thing to think about is if you're driving a vehicle with no glass in it, such as a van or a lorry, then you would be more inclined to signal round a parked car because the vehicle behind you can't see the obstacle that you're going to move around. So depending on what you're driving, but generally you don't need to signal round parked cars unless what you see in your mirror would dictate that you do need to. We will be talking in our roundabout podcasts about signalling. It's a little bit more complex, but as a general rule of thumb, if we're turning left first exit at a roundabout, we would be signalling on approach. If we're going ahead, second exit, we wouldn't signal on approach, but we would put a left signal on after we've passed the first exit. If we're turning right, third exit, we would generally approach in the right lane with the right signal, and then when we've passed the second exit, we would signal left. So roundabouts are a little bit of a separate beast, and we do need to talk about them in more detail, which will of course be in the roundabout podcasts. I hope you found that useful, and please enjoy the rest of the podcast on our MSPSL routine. And of course, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to message me.